Hey everybody, welcome back to Human Reaction, your weekly source for independent commentary on cultural news and politics, where it's always our mission to arm you with the tools you need to cut through media misdirection and resist the mono-narrative. We have a killer show for you today. David, what are we talking about?
Lindsay Graham comes up with a bold new foreign policy strategy for the United States. Be Spain in 1563. That's all you got to do, and that's prosperity.
I have no idea what that means.
That's a forever empire.
But I trust you'll explain.
Yeah, right. Come on, that's a deep one. Russell will get it. All right, so as predicted by techno music, Europe lurches to the far right again.
Kyle, wherever you are, this one's for you. I hope it gets stuck in your head.
All right, and Saudi Arabia breaks up with the U.S. over text message. Question?
U.S. leaves Saudi on red?
Yeah, right. Skynet will be natively built into your iPhone. Sounds like a great idea, right?
I love it.
And in the skiff, we're going to talk about whether U-turns are gay enough. You heard that right.
It'll make more sense later.
And Jake Paul interviews Donald Trump, and we'll be talking about that.
But before we get started, please do like, follow, subscribe, hit the notification bell on YouTube, and leave us a review wherever you are listening on the internet. We'd love to thank our members who are supporting us financially. And if you would like to join the show and become a member, go to humanreactionpod.com. We have a killer Discord community as well, which is growing by the day. And we have amazing memes in that community, not least of which this one from our friend Adam Thune. In honor of Hunter Biden getting convicted of some gun crimes, they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in the way. Classic homage. Classic homage.
It's such a good boomer meme reference, right? Because it's like when Donald Trump is being persecuted. Mm-hmm. You got all these memes saying the same thing. And I just love how delicious it is, because this is what the Democrats would say. Like they're really going after Hunter because, he's their hero. The hero they didn't know they needed.
Of course. Exactly.
The ideal Democrat, right?
What's that?
The ideal Democrat.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Well, he's
globetrotting. He's open to multiculturalism, especially in his prostitutes.
He's very open about drug policy reforms.
Yeah. He's also gun laws. He's very consistent about the gun laws.
Well,
okay, this is what pisses me off.
He's kind of a libertarian, right?
Actually, he kind of
Don't
is.
put that on us.
Pro-drugs, pro-sex work, pro-gun.
Wow. Okay, maybe Hunter Biden was the candidate the LP didn't have, but really needed.
Right. He's the hero we didn't know we needed.
And that's really the tragedy of him being, prosecuted on the gun charge of everything else. I mean, he's not being prosecuted for Burisma. He's not being prosecuted for acting as a foreign agent while, not registered as one, while lobbying his dad and other members of the government and literally selling that as a service. We know that overtly, but never registering as a foreign agent while taking clients that are foreign nationals in China and Ukraine. And then we don't go for him for that. We go for him on a gun charge, which is really sad.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, truly.
Anyways.
Well, spoiler alert, we have the lovely Kat Dwyer joining us in place of Kyle Mack today. Kat, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anything exciting going on in your life?
Oh, goodness.
I didn't mean to put you
Nothing.
on the spot. I was trying to corner
I floated the Smith. That's
did?
my big exciting
Oh, you guys
update.
both?
No shit.
Oh,
when did you float the
Oh,
Smith?
really? Last week, Wednesday through Sunday.
Nice. We launched on Saturday.
Oh, cool.
And I just got off 2 days ago.
Oh,
so,
right on.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, you got some
sunburns.
color.
Let's
Love
go.
it. Yeah, I've been super
Pictures of
sunburned.
sunburns.
Yeah. Feel your pain.
Yeah, you should see the tan line on my thighs right now. It's
Nice.
pretty good. It's pretty good. All right. In other exciting news, we just got confirmation that Human Reaction Podcast is going to be at Freedom Fest with media credentials. So we're going to be showing up to Las Vegas July 10th through 13th. We're going to party with you. You should get tickets. Go to their website, freedomfest.com, to grab your tickets. The lineup of speakers are going to be great. And we're contemplating throwing a little bash, a little Human Reaction shindig for any of our friends and followers and listeners / viewers that decide to join us in Vegas. So.
Yeah. If you make it to Vegas, we will do a cool thing. You just got to let us know. So throw us something in Discord and we'll meet up together for Human Reaction supportthis in Las Vegas.
Bottle service.
Oh, yeah.
We'll get a table.
It'll be very
great.
fancy.
It'll be
I'm sure.
really swanky.
With the whole tens of dollars we make on this podcast.
And if you want to sponsor our trip to Freedom Fest, do that. All right, let's get on with it. What is our first story, Mr. Rand?
All right, so we got this little clip from Lindsay Graham talking on Face the Nation. It's hosted, this is obviously quoted by Blaze, which is really encouraging to see the Blaze putting Lindsey Graham's ridiculous opinions out there to this level.
Before we play it,
Yeah.
have you heard Trump call Face the Nation deface the nation?
No, I haven't heard of it.
So good. He used that in his interview with Jake Paul. It's great.
Wow,
all right.
Quite the burn, Trump. Well done, I guess.
It's called Face the Nation. I call it deface the nation. It's really what they do. Deface the nation. Okay.
So here's Lindsey Graham talking about his brand new foreign policy, Be Spain. Go.
What did Trump do to get the weapons flowing? He created a loan system. They're sitting on $10 to $12 trillion of critical minerals in Ukraine. They could be the richest country in all of Europe. I don't want to give that money and those assets to Putin to share with China. If we help Ukraine now, they can become the best business partner we ever dreamed of. That $10 to $12 trillion of critical mineral assets could be used by Ukraine and the West, not given to Putin and China. This is a very big deal. How Ukraine ends. Mm-hmm. Let's help them win a war we can't afford to lose. Let's find a solution to this war. But they're sitting on a gold mine to give Putin $10 or $12 trillion of critical minerals that he will share with China is ridiculous.
Oh, I see. The true motives come out?
Yeah, so it's classic, right? So first is defending democracy against Hitler too, right? Robo-Hitler has come to Europe again. And that's what Putin is, right? He's both an insane person and a Machiavellian mastermind, super genius, right? But then everyone was like, that doesn't make any sense. So they're like, well, now we got to degrade Russian military forces, right? That was the next justification we heard. And then after that, as of the last couple of months, it's been economic stimulus. So all these dollars that we're sending there actually are all spent in Northern Virginia to Northrop Grumman and good American jobs here in America.
Good, clean American jobs.
Yeah. And so now it's do it for the minerals, right? Imagine, right? You're the king of Spain, and some guy comes back and is like, okay, what we could do is we can either set up colonies there, or we can just send an army and just take all the gold and bring it back to Spain, and then we'll be rich.
Deal.
That's how wealth works, right?
That's how it works.
That's totally how it works. That won't have any collateral consequences in the economy.
No.
And that will definitely... It didn't work out well for Spain.
How did it work out for Spain?
It didn't work out well. So mercantilism is that idea that you grow your economy by going out, grabbing resources, and bringing them home. Protecting your internal industries while going out and snagging resources from external to it. That's a definition of mercantilism, right? Mm-hmm. So the problem with that is that in Spain's case, and in any nation that conducts mercantilism, which many have, Britain has, we do, all kinds of nations do. In fact, remember Biden just taking oil rigs from the Iranians and forcing them to go to U.S. ports?
Yep.
We reported on that a little while ago.
Biden's piracy.
Yeah, right. That idea is a mercantilist idea, and it's this idea that you're preventing them from getting wealth. Or like Russia, and then Russia's going to share that wealth with China, as if they're natural friends, as if we didn't drive them into the arms of each other. But laying that aside, the problem with mercantilism is it tends to lead to, it doesn't invest in the thing that actually creates wealth, which is an increase in the division of labor and your ability to actually produce things that solve people's problems. More gold doesn't actually solve things, right? Just like printing more dollars doesn't solve things, doesn't actually make you more wealthy. It is actually your ability to increase the division of labor in mutually beneficial ways that solve actual human problems. That's what creates wealth.
Productivity.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the minerals just being an input to productivity don't inherently make anybody any richer. You actually have to be able to process them and have industries around turning them into things that create value for society.
Right. And in order to get the hold of these ones, we are paying a price, right? They're not getting them for free. We're paying trillions of dollars or hundreds of billions of dollars at that minimum.
Oh, I'm sure soon to be trillions of dollars.
Yeah, to do so.
Yeah.
Also, when did it become okay to start a war over natural resources? Yes, we've done that, right? For many years. But that was always people were always critical of that, and we always said it was not for those. We weren't doing this for oil. We were doing it for democracy and freedom.
Yeah, it's not
we
the
gotta
poppies
fight them
in
there.
Afghanistan.
We'll fight them here.
Yeah, exactly.
And now they're just blatantly saying like, well, they have mineral deposits that we could benefit from, and so we're going to strategically do this to defeat our enemies.
They tried this in Afghanistan too. They were at the end of the Afghanistan withdrawal. They're like, but what about all the rare earth minerals?
Right.
And we'll lose out on it. Yeah.
And the heroin. Yeah.
But what about the opioids? Yeah, classic.
Well, we have to keep them from the Taliban. I mean, that was the real concern, right?
Right.
And then the Taliban come in and just burn them to the ground, and we're like, oh, wait, they don't like drugs? Oh, weird. Yeah, no, it's like they're getting to the bottom of all the excuses they can use for why the Ukraine war is a good thing to do, and like this is the very last one on the list. We're like, shit, all right, well, let's try it. Let's see if it works.
Right.
I don't think it's gonna work. This episode is brought to you by Revved Up Promo, the official apparel partner of Human Reaction. Revved Up is a premier full-service shop specializing in laser engraving, screen printing, and embroidery. Not only are they now making all of our apparel right down the road from us, they can do the same for your brand and ship it to you anywhere in the world. Revved Up helps you navigate the extensive universe of merch options and uses state-of-the-art techniques to showcase your brand in its very best light. So if you want to support our show and our generous sponsor, you can now do so by buying our merch and by turning to Revved Up Promo for your own custom apparel needs. Reach them at revveduppromo.com. That's with 2 V's and 2 P's, or just check the show notes for a link. If you are a small business owner looking for exponential growth, you have to connect with Adam Thune at Intellectual Patriots. He will revolutionize your business game and help you get to the next level. Adam can streamline your business practices and advertising strategies to improve your bottom line. His expertise in data engineering means he can build you the systems you need to collect and analyze market data. His mission is to provide you with invaluable insights to fuel your success. From grant writing and business proposals to digital systems integrations, even AI management, Intellectual Patriots is a one-stop shop for cutting-edge solutions. Don't wait another second. Visit intelpatriots.com to learn more. That's INTEL patriots.com. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Zesty Beverages. They're on a mission to the standard American diet by crafting drinks with fewer calories and more nutrients from real food. Their lineup of delicious offerings now includes Electric Peak Yerba Mate, postbiotic sodas, keto-friendly, ready-to-drink margaritas, and hard teas. Wondering what a postbiotic soda is? Well, head on over to zestybev.com to learn more and find a retailer near you. Once again, check them out online at zestybev.com. That's ZESTYBEV.com.
So the next story that we have today is the EU elections. Now, this got very confused online, specifically at the case of France. But basically what happened in short is a bunch of countries, 27 in total, had their EU elections lurch to the right in a major way.
For the EU Parliament.
Yeah.
Yeah.
25 in total, not 27. So the EU Parliament is different from the national parliament of these countries. And this is what kept on getting confused because Americans don't understand the EU. And I'm not claiming I'm like, I'm an expert or something like that. But see, you understand there's kind of multiple layers here, just like there is a House and a Senate, 2 elections, right, that affect 2 different bodies. You'll have your national parliament, like French will elect their national parliament. And then you'll have your EU Parliament, where they all go to Brussels, much like our representatives, our state representatives here go to Helena, and then our federal representatives go to D.C. Their Brussels is our D.C., right?
Gotcha.
All right. So in the EU, a bunch of these states lurched to the right, meaning more right-wing groups won and got more seats than is historically true in the pendulum swinging back and forth that's usual in parliamentary elections.
So the pendulum has swung further to the right than historically.
Than ever before.
Wow.
Since the founding of the EU.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is a big deal.
And the other kind of big news out of that election was that the Green parties lost more seats than they ever have before. So
interesting.
So the right has momentum, and the left is losing some momentum. But in particular, the Green parties are losing the most momentum.
The climate forward.
Yes.
Activists, you might say, the people who are trying to ban fertilizer and things of that nature,
and force everyone to change their home heating systems and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And what's interesting here, so and you kind of connect it to what's happened, right? Brexit happens in 2016, right? That's like the first chink in the armor for the EU. I mean, it really changes the entire dynamic. We know the censorship industrial complex is created out of basically goes from doing the Arab Spring to now concerned about West and narrative formation and what's it, counter-populism, I believe is the new phrase of art from Schellenberger and others. So we know that Brexit is like the turning point for that. With that, since 2020, somewhere in there, we have protests in France, Germany, Belgium, Poland, Hungary, Italy, Scotland, all farmers' protests, mostly on carbon and trade policies. Some of these being kind of cronyist, right? Being like, we had special subsidies.
We want our subsidies back. Yeah, totally.
But also being like, hey, you are subsidizing other industries, but not us. Why? Right? Like, if everyone's going to get a paycheck, why can't we?
And fuel taxes. You know, that would like taxes on diesel that would totally disrupt and add costs to that industry. So some of it was like subsidies, which I think as libertarians, we kind of don't have a lot of sympathy for. However, the increased taxes to punish the consumption of fossil fuels is, I think, something we'd all agree is not a good policy.
Right. Yeah. So like in many states in the United States, you have two different kinds of diesel at your diesel pump, right? One that is for agricultural equipment, because we recognize if we tax diesel on the streets the same as agriculture, there's something unfair about that, right? Because the agricultural equipment isn't being used on the streets. They're not wearing down the streets. So there's an unfairness there. And then there's also like if we put taxes as an input to food, that makes food more expensive, which is bad for poor people, right? So they have similar sets of arrangements where diesel's taxed differently than other forms, and they were ending that in order to try to force them to get like a battery operated tractor, right? Which is like, that's insane. Just another expensive input, right?
Yeah.
And then additionally to that, you got places like Germany in 2020 and 2021, when the Green Party took over, they took away all their nuclear power plants, right? Ended a lot of them. So Germans now spend 40% more on energy on average and 41% more than the average European.
And they import more coal than they had previously.
Yeah, ironically.
Foreign coal.
Wow. And wasn't Trump laughing, or wasn't Trump warning them like, hey, you guys shouldn't be doing this. This is going to result in some terrible energy prices for you guys. This was back in the day. And they were laughing at him saying that. And
an over-reliance on Russian energy. Mm-hmm. And, Russia absolutely is sort of covertly behind supporting and promoting sort of the green agenda throughout Europe because they benefit directly from it. Imports of their natural gas, their coal, have increased as individual countries have closed their nuclear power plants or stopped producing and drilling their own natural gas, whatever. They've started importing more from Russia. So,
which is a deep play by Russia, if true. The interesting thing there is the degree to which liquid natural gas is such a huge explainer for the decrease in carbon emissions in the United States.
Right.
So if you're on coal, it makes total green sense to move to natural gas. But if you're on nuclear, it makes no sense at all to go to natural gas.
Right.
Like, you're taking a step clearly backwards.
Right. Which begs the question, what is the real agenda and logic behind the green movement?
Yeah. And also interesting here, and I tend to underestimate this, how much we're a global society in this sense. It's really weird to be watching things in German about a new Green Deal as like a policy agenda for the EU, a Green New Deal. The New Deal is an American policy, referenced by FDR.
Yeah.
Why are they talking about this in the EU? That makes no sense. Why?
It's a global movement.
What is the thing there? That is what's interesting here. A global movement. It's that difference. And this is that the far right are terrible Nazis.
Racist.
I almost said N-words, just like we didn't trigger the algorithm, but I figured that might be worse. But yeah, they're terrible fascists, right? For their sentiments on these things, right? They're backwards because they don't want to go to our green future, our beautiful utopia we're about to enter. And so, but there's very clearly a populist thing happening here where you have the highest turnout in an EU parliamentary election in forever, with a huge right-wing shift as a result of that. And it's the universalization of like a neoliberal vision of like a green utopia versus the everyday farmer, right? That's the dynamic we're actually at play here. And with that dynamic, it's very clear who's the elite trying to plan society and who's the one saying, no, just leave me alone.
Right. Well, and it's the same dynamic in play on the immigration issue, which is the other piece that largely drove these election results. That a lot of these countries are, I mean, since like 2015, roughly, they've been seeing massive waves of immigration that have not stopped, illegal immigration. And it's not a matter of being xenophobic or racist. It's a matter of how can you culturally, socially, financially, economically absorb that many people on a regular basis for years before it becomes an unsustainable situation. Like it's how do you assimilate that many people at once, right? Like there needs to be a better system in place. And I think to your point, David, it's really like I think the real divide is not left and right. It's really populists or nationalists, I'd rather call them, versus globalists.
Yeah.
But that's exactly right. Like that idea we talked about a couple weeks ago with this German thing, and the stabbing happened, all that kind of stuff. Terrible things happened there. But that, if you look, I mean, I got this article from El País. 7 out of 10 Europeans believe that their country takes in too many immigrants. More than 60% say the EU should strengthen support for Ukraine in favor of a ceasefire with Moscow. The irony of public polling, I guess. But I mean, there's something 7 out of 10. Very few things in public polling at all have 7 out of 10 support. It's like, oh, do you want more welfare benefits for free with no raising taxes? That gets 7 out of 10, right? Like delusional things. No, this is like a real policy, like grounded policy that like is, I think, built into a fundamental vision of European centricness that is on the rise right now, where it says like, no, we're not like America. We're not just like a set of ideas. Germans in Germany have been here for a long time. We have a unique culture that we want to preserve, and we don't want to see that go away. And we're worried it's going to at this current clip of immigration rate. Maybe they're wrong, but it's a thing that we should be able to debate and talk about. And these people shouldn't be shamed out of public existence just for having that concern.
I also think it's sort of insane that nations, America, to your point, is kind of a different question, but Germany, Italy, Japan, even like nations that have a unique historical cultural identity, they didn't colonize Europe, right? Like they are the native population there. The idea that it's somehow like xenophobic for them to want to preserve their culture, yet at the same time, the people who accuse them of that make the argument that, the foreign nationals that have moved to Europe have every right to not assimilate and maintain their culture. It's this funny, like...
Well, it actually produced a lot of problems, right? So
Yeah.
if you look at While Europe Slept, which is a kind of famous book from the early 2000s about this very phenomena, in the Netherlands and these places where you have enclaves of large Muslim majorities, it becomes a very big problem because their labor rules keep them out of the marketplace for labor. So you have these large populations of people who are just on welfare who don't have access to the labor market because there's a guild system in Europe that's persisted for hundreds of years, that keeps them from being able to get high, the jobs functionally. And that in a heavy welfare state that doesn't require a lot to get benefits produces a lot of negative outcomes. So they simultaneously have all these systems to protect natives, supposedly in the workplace, while they import new workers. While they also, like, it's obviously a completely contradictory policy that has no clear vision about, like, okay, and this is interesting too. When we got into this, like, cultural piece is very interesting. Like the way they see themselves is very strange to me as an outsider. When we got really big in Ireland, I don't know if you saw that, but we had a TikTok go to 600,000 views in Ireland, talking about migrants in Ireland. And one of the things I saw was in the comments, these people going back and forth about how racist it was for Ireland not to accept people from other places. And I was like, as if there was like some guilt of the past for them to have to repay to the world. And it's like, you're Ireland, you're a colony. You're way more colonized than many other places in the world.
Right.
So why would you have this view? Well, it's a very simple, like, white people bad sort of view.
Right.
And what I struggle with is that idea is like, there's something to be maintained. And then there's also like, hey, there's labor market needs that could be fulfilled, but then you're not addressing your labor market reforms at all. You're maintaining those forever. So what's the actual vision for immigration to Europe? And it doesn't make any sense because it's not serving the people there. But what it is happening for sure, and we know this, is there's a huge effort to counter-popular this narrative, to say anyone who says this is a racist, a xenophobe, and a terrible person. And yet it's not even working. Because 7 out of 10 say they're taking in too many immigrants, and obviously this elections are going the way they are. So it's a huge difference.
Well, because people are living with the consequences of it, right? Like they're living with the consequences of the green policies that are making their costs of living more expensive. They're living with the consequences of an influx of people from other parts of the world that, not for racist reasons, but because there's strain on their social systems, there's strain on their housing availability. There's just like practical strains that are lowering the quality of life for the people who were born and raised there and have generations, dating back. They have a history there. They're living with that. So I think they could be gaslit, to use a popular term, and use it accurately here. It gets misused constantly.
Thank you.
To be gaslit and told like, this isn't a problem and you should shut up and take it. And if you don't, you're racist or whatever. That can only works for so long until people are living every day with the consequences of it. They see the evidence of it, and they're not going to believe who do they believe, you or their lying eyes, right? Like they know what's happening. So I think that's what we're seeing. They've reached a tipping point where like they can't be lied to any longer.
So we do have some countervailing pushback going the other direction. Slovakia and Hungary both went the other direction. So that's interesting because you got Orban, and then Slovakia is the place where that dude almost got assassinated. We covered that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. So how did that election turn out?
So they had marginal gains to the left, in the pro-EU camp would probably be the more clear way to say it. It wasn't like the Green Party. It was like the want to be allied with the EU and America side. Well, the other side is more like we want to be independent from America, not a vassal state, and we don't want to. And that makes them pro-Russian or some bullshit, according to the way it's covered, or EU skeptic. They don't want a lot of power from their national states, whether it's Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, whatever, going to EU. They want a more Brexit-like decentralization down to it. Now, some of these parties want to straight up leave the EU. They're actual Brexit-like parties. And those guys did okay. For example, Alternative for Deutschland, they have probably the strongest foreign policy angle there, where they're talking about, hey, we should be Russia's friend. We shouldn't be, going to war with Russia with America's backing. And they seem to be most clearly like EU skeptics. They're the youngest party out of all the ones here. They're like strongly Gen Z. They're called the TikTok party there. And
actually,
yeah, because they're just that big on TikTok. And they have, and it's funny that France is run too from the that has caused like the dissolution of the National Assembly and calling for another national election based upon the EU results. That situation is also a bunch of young people. Germany actually reduced the, this is a great play because it blew up in their faces. Germany reduced the voting age from 18 to 16. And they have the biggest right-wing swing ever.
Wow. Fascinating.
Here's my theory on why. Tell me if I'm full of shit. These kids are further from the World War II generation than any other generation, right? Yeah. They have less of a reason to feel like, oh, you want Deutschland for Deutschland? How could you? Right? That's what the bad guy said.
They have
with
less
the little mustache
over.
Yeah, they're like, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the Jews. I'm not talking about these things. I'm talking about the fact that there's a lot of unemployed, men who barely speak my language in my neighborhood, and they kind of freak me out.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and also I think in the context of Germany and the war in Ukraine, ever since somebody took out the Nord Stream pipeline, there's like serious fears about deindustrialization in Germany, right? Their manufacturing, and they are the manufacturing like hub of Europe, has been decimated by this war. So like they have legitimate economic reasons to not want to prolong this conflict.
Are you kidding me, Kat? You can't melt steel with solar panels? Is that what you're telling me? You can't like just spin up a little windmill?
Get out your magnifying glass.
It's hard to believe.
Just position it just right.
We're not there yet, unfortunately. But so I mean, it's like, again, they get sort of branded as being, racist for wanting to prevent a global conflict that is ruining their economy, when in reality, it's like a completely rational conclusion to come to.
Completely.
And that's the thing, is there's like a pushback. It's not wise to see this as simply like a swing to the right that happens for no reason, which is how it seems to be covered in the press for the most part. The mono narrative is really saying, for some crazy reason, probably because of Donald Trump, the EU is now full of Nazis, right? That's the better way to see it, as this is a populist pushback to an elite that is trying to drive them in a very Malthusian direction, where it's saying the goal is to limit access to energy to make us richer, right? That somehow the goal is to reduce population and import foreign labor to make us richer, as opposed to ideas that matter to regular people, like who are we as a country, and do my children have an opportunity to make a living here?
Yeah. And who benefits from imported, exploited, cheap labor? The rich.
Yeah.
The rich benefit from it, right? Like,
totally.
It creates a stratified economic system. Like, and it's just so ironic that the leftists are for this. I mean, it's not actually ironic. If you know the history of communism, it's not ironic at all. But like, it's based on their sort of messaging. It's quite rich that, they're actually the side, so to speak, that's for exploiting labor, and using these people to enrich an elite class.
Oh, and this is not a foreign phenomena to the United States either. In fact, to our area.
Right.
Right. We've talked before. I've chatted recently with a retired Bozeman PD officer, talks all the time, or we had a conversation at length about how the cartels have moved into Bozeman. They've set up shop here, and they're not only are they trading in drugs and that sort of thing, but people also, and a lot of it is all the labor force that's needed to build, and facilitate the construction boom that we've experienced here. And who's benefiting from that? Well, it's large developers that are putting in all the new, high-rise apartments and condos and that sort of thing. And what is it doing? But straining social systems and, housing availability, all the things that it's doing in Ireland and other countries. It's happening right here in our backyard too.
So you get some other directions or other things that have come up in this as a result of these EU elections. Nigel Farage's new Brexit party is now leading in the UK European elections poll. Nigel Farage was really big pre-Brexit world, but Nigel Farage is back again with a bunch of wins potentially for the pro-Brexit side, and kind of defending Brexit because Brexit has become unpopular in like the media. It's always been unpopular in the media, but it's like starting to lose popularity amongst the general public as they've coming to terms with the fact that, okay, now they have to cut new trade deals and things like that. So there's kind of like a push to the counter push to keep the EU or to keep the UK out of the EU happening in Britain, and then in France because of these European elections. This was miscovered. This is what I mentioned earlier, some fake news. It was kind of covered as if when the elections happened, Macron just canceled his own parliament when the elections didn't go his way. That was kind of how it was kind of talked about on X and these places. That's not what happened. What happened was, for the EU elections, Macron realized that his country was basically going in the opposite direction. So he wanted to give the opposition an opportunity to run an election early enough this year so that he could demonstrate why they're bad and then win his own election year in 2027.
Right. Which I think is obviously a gamble.
Yeah.
But the election results in like Hungary and Slovakia, and I could be totally wrong, but this is just kind of a rough assessment. Mm-hmm. I think like the populist nationalist, whatever you want to call it, like movement is authentic and genuine and has like valid reasons for emerging. But governing is an entirely different task. And so I wonder if, like Hungary already had like a nationalist leader, right, for years now. So I wonder if like their elections kind of swung the other way because inevitably the ruling party didn't deliver everything they promised on, and it's harder to implement whatever reforms than, it is to promise them. And so people get kind of fed up and then they vote in something different. So I think Macron's gamble is, okay, there's momentum for this now, but it's untested. Mm-hmm. So let's maybe let them gain momentum and win seats now, and they'll fail. And then I can, secure the next presidential election.
And there's always a distinguishing between whether the EU elections are a reinforcer or condemnation of the current national government,
right,
or if they're about EU policy. Imagine this.
that's
So
fair.
like when it's going really great in Montana, sometimes we'll keep sending John Tester up to DC, right? Because we don't really care what's happening in DC. We just don't care about what are happening in our individual lives, what seems to be happening in our state.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar in the EU. Right.
Sure.
They're basically, and that's probably how he's seeing it, right? This is a condemnation of his government, so he wants to give the parliament a chance because he's the president. He has a different electoral term. He wants to give the parliament a chance to fail. And Le Pen, right? Is her name? Yeah.
And she's emerged as like one of the strongest leaders in Europe right now, right? So like
based
because
feminist
of
or no?
this, and yeah, I think so. Based feminist, yeah. Her and Giorgia Meloni as well in Italy. Or anyway, but I think to your point, like, yes, the EU is different than their national governments, obviously, but like, I think this trend politically scares these leaders because they realize like, okay, there's more support for these opposition parties than we realized. So I think that's his gamble. It's a pretty big gamble because they could win and they could do well, and
That could be bad.
yeah, it could blow up.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it could be like a Javier Milei situation, right? Where he's actually able to turn stuff around and things are going better. And it's like, uh-oh, you're
Right.
really hosed. I mean, are we going to see a continuing cascade of this sort of movement in the other parts of the world, in other countries in Europe? Do you expect this to be a continuation that we see going forward?
Well, the biggest variables are France and Germany, right? They're also most populous. There's all kinds of reasons why France and Germany are kind of the centerpieces of the EU, right? It's based in Brussels. Larger populations, more active economies, stronger currencies going into the creation of the EU. So their place in this can't be underestimated. I think when you think, if you're heavy in that variable, it looks like a very favorable trend. But when you zoom out and you look at all 27 member states, the more you're like, okay, well, there's counter signaling, right? We've got Slovakia and Hungary. We also got Ireland, for example, has huge protests going on, but relatively small electoral gains. So there's like a translation between the activity of the idea and putting that into political force. And it's the Netherlands and Germany and France have been we've been talking about those guys in this, like, are they going right wing since like 2016, right? So it's taken a lot of time to get to this place for them. And some of these states are just starting that process, like Ireland and some of these other smaller states, or Italy, of really going hard that way.
And I don't think like these results are necessarily like a rebuke of the EU. And like we saw in that one stat you pulled up, like there is largely still support for the war in Ukraine. Like there's a lot of things that are still kind of aligned with the status quo. But I think it's more just a message that we need to, like, really it's immigration and climate policy. And it's not even, it's more of it's like a moderating force. It's not even, they aren't actually far right, and that characterization, it's so lazy. And not only is it lazy, but it's actually dangerous because the longer that like the press, the elites, sort of the ruling class, the longer they ignore the message that their constituents have been trying to send to them for years now, the deeper the resentment is going to grow amongst that voting bloc, right? And like that chasm could get so deep that it's irreparable at a certain point. It also radicalizes people. You get to a place where you're like the killdozer guy, where you're like, fuck you. Like, I've tried every avenue. I've tried to be reasonable. Now I'm going to be extreme, And so it's they're playing with fire by ignoring these people.
Yeah. The other side, we are getting some signals that they are moderating, right? So we got a lot of center right pickups in this, right? There are the moderate party and center left, like changing of points of view. For example, there was in late 2023, December 2023, the EU adopted a new migration pact agreement that was condemned by Amnesty International. So, it's probably not very favorable to more migrants for not continuing to expand migration and immigration. So like there is like a movement, they're kind of citizens. Imagine it's, and we see this all the time in the United States. You'll see establishment Democrats and Republicans suddenly on election years adopt the talking points of their radical parts of their wings in order to keep from being pulled out from the center too far. So.
Also, I think like Europe is farther left and has been than America for quite some time. So like that, I think we have to keep that perspective too. Like their moderating they're not shifting from the center to the right. I feel like they're shifting from the far left toward the center.
Yes. I think that's absolutely right.
One other point I'd just like to make about England in particular. So that's kind of like maybe the outlier piece in this, that the Tories, who have been in power for like 10 years almost, or I think roughly, they're largely expected. They're having an election on July 4th, which is sort of interesting timing.
Ironic.
Yeah. And they're largely expected to be trounced by the Labor Party. And the Tories are basically the conservatives and Labor's the left. And I don't think that is a reflection of English people wanting like left-wing policies. I think it's a dissatisfaction with the Tories in particular because they weren't conservative enough. Like when they got into power talking about Brexit, talking about reforming immigration, like, having just legal immigration instead of mass illegal immigration, which seems reasonable. Tax reform, pro-business measures, like kind of bread and butter conservative policies. And from, my vantage point on the other side of the pond, it seems like they have just completely almost been they've been like suckered into accepting left-wing policies because that's sort of what's seen as like the status quo and what's like acceptable. And, almost as if they were like harangued into buying into the green agenda completely, which they did. Liz Truss was their prime minister for like 5 seconds, and she got voted out after she was like, maybe we should cut taxes. And they were like, kill her. So like there was just it. I think everyone's dissatisfied with them because they've given them enough of a shot. They haven't delivered. And a lot of like the media in America is interpreting that as like England being the outlier that's going farther left than the rest of Europe after these EU parliamentary elections. And I think that's mistaken. I think really what it is the Tories dropped the ball and let them down, and they're willing to vote for Labour because it's their only other alternative. Right. And also, if you watch how the Labour Party's campaigning, they aren't talking about any left-wing stuff. They actually are sounding more conservative. Not conservative. They're sounding more just like pro-working class, like old school leftists rather than like the modern progressive elitist leftists.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like
U-turns
UK
aren't gay enough, sort of. Leftist.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
It sounds like the UK might be ready for their own Javier Milei kind of moment, like a third party populist movement that can maybe take some of the energy from both of those sides and channel it into something that's actually effective.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why Nigel Farage is rising again, because he's like, well, okay, there's obviously a gap here. The Tories are useless and aren't what they used to be. So now there's an opportunity for like a new party.
And that's what I meant. I didn't talk about it very well, but you're right. In this, getting some coverage in the United States, Nigel Farage shakes up UK election, establishment on return to politics. He's, quote, the British Trump. And it's not the Brexit Party anymore, so it's a Reform UK. But think of this as the right wing to the Tories, trying to actually come in and try to save the day here as things are going more to the left. Now, what probably the best prediction, if just going by the laws of push and pull in politics, is that they'll swing to the left, and then that will be, a moderate disaster, and then maybe they'll swing to the right, and we'll get another Reform UK kind of moment for some actual reform.
I'll make a prediction. I'm fully ready to be wrong about it, but I bet so. Everyone's like Labor's going to win, so they're probably going to win. But I bet they won't get past one term. At least the prime minister.
There you have it. You have it here. If you're getting on your betting odds, go with Kat. All right, so we have another story, kind of an international story. We're going to international story mode today. Where this is you get all the best information here at Human Reaction on international affairs. The U.S.-Saudi petrodollar pact ends after 50 years.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. We got NASDAQ.com covering it. Written by Paul Hoffman for Tip Ranks. Interesting. Who's Paul Hoffman? And then we got this story from Business Standard saying the same thing. Saudi Radio petrodollar exit, a global financial paradigm shift. And
so just so far, we've never ever before referenced NASDAQ.com or the Business Standard for anything.
Yeah.
Who are these?
No
outlets?
idea. But so the question is, what is going on? So the internet kind of got lit up, and I tried to find a good video of this, and they're either too long or too boring. But essentially, and I'm suffering from like a Mandela effect thing going on here. Or like maybe the Bernstein Bears thing.
Yeah.
Like, how do you spell it? Like, I very clearly remember an INE. Is that right?
No.
No. EIN. Yeah, right. Yeah. And it's
So Mandela effect, right, is remembering something that you're so confident was one way, but it's actually a different way.
yeah. And I can't, one of the, we both were independently looking at this story and thinking, why can't I find anything on this? Like that looks not from NASDAQ.com
Or like Times of India.
And
Yeah.
That was
what is
my
it-
source.
What is it that you think was different that is now being proven to be not the way you thought it was?
that there was a deal probably crafted in the 1970s to peg oil sales from Saudi Arabia to the dollar. And I can find no substantiation for that. I have an indirect substantiation from that we can get to. But what we're finding is that this week there was probably some kind of operation done by somebody who might be this guy, because I saw him in several other places, Paul Hoffman, to pump an anti-dollar trend based upon the idea that in 1974, there was a pact between the United States Nixon administration, using Henry Kissinger as he went to Saudi Arabia, to create an agreement for the dollar to be pegged, for basically Saudi Arabia to use US dollars in oil sales. That doesn't appear to be true. And that was kind of generated out of a theory about some interactions that happened on the global stage at that time that has kind of persisted despite the evidence, despite being a lack of evidence for it.
See, I feel like I remember that too.
Right. And I feel like it's something that happened in the Bush administration where it was like really clear that that was it, that there was something going on in that. And there's always these rumors about our international policy actually being mercantilism, right? Basically going to Iraq for oil, or going to overthrowing Libya or Syria or whatever because they were about to go onto the gold standard that would destroy the dollar. Those might be true. I'm open to that. But the origin of that is always this idea that when we went off the gold standard, we went to a petrodollar. And the way that petrodollar is organized is through a fixing of a pegging of oil prices to dollars, because they're one of the biggest actors, Saudi Arabia, deals only in dollars. But this article from Protos.com, which is it's like a cryptocurrency website, basically says, no, it's all bullshit. And it's a pretty good case, in part because global payments for currency in US dollars is 47% overall everywhere, right? And that the that the Saudis have been moving in and out of dollars at different rates at different times all the time for a very long time. That the actual agreement, if there is an agreement, the Saudis haven't been obeying it.
I found it. So I'm sorry. I was on Wikipedia. I looked up Bretton Woods. In 1973, this is on Wikipedia, Nixon and the Secretary of State Henry Kissinger made a secret deal with Saudi Arabia to trade oil only in U.S. dollars, thus pegging the U.S. dollar to oil and birthing the petrodollar. 1973.
To stabilize our currency.
That's not Bretton Woods.
Well, I looked up the Bretton Woods system, and this
Yeah.
is within the Wikipedia entry for the Bretton Woods system.
Yeah, so the problem with that is not accurate. Let me explain.
Calling me out
on
the show. I mean, look, it's not me. It's just Wikipedia, right? I'm just saying I found it. Anyway.
So, there must be.
This is from inflationdata.com.
What is?
That's the source to your Bretton Woods thing here.
Why are you yelling at me right now?
And its source for this is, since 1975, the dollar suffered a 350% inflation, blah, blah, blah. There's no source here. And this is from Tim McMahon, who is just a guy who writes on about inflation. So the trick here is
obviously found this and you were like, this isn't substantive at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, I actually just looked up I knew this was related to Bretton Woods, but Bretton Woods isn't that. Bretton Woods is an agreement about the way that America would repatriate dollars in treasury bonds. That's what Bretton Woods was. So it's okay.
Because countries wanted their gold reserves back because they saw that the U.S. was inflating the dollar, and then they were like, whoa, no, we can't do that, right?
Right.
So here's how we're going to basically peg the dollar to something of value for you.
Right. That was the agreement from World War II to the 1970s. Then Nixon said, we're going off the gold standard. Right. So the argument is that when Nixon did that in 1971, in 1974, they made a new deal with the Saudis for the new standard would be the oil, using this agreement to peg dollars to oil. Now, that doesn't make any sense. Here's why. That doesn't actually create a gold standard or an oil standard. You're not actually compensating oil for dollars. You're just fixing it in terms of pricing.
Yeah,
to use dollars.
You're just creating global demand for dollars because oil is heavily traded across the world.
It makes more sense if it was treasury bonds, and that's probably the actual deal. So treasury bonds, the 1974 agreement, according to actual sources, and we do, and there is de-dollarization evidence, and I want to make sure we return to that. So I want to mention it right now. Wall Street Journal, for example, said Saudi Arabia considers accepting yuan instead of dollars for Beijing oil sales. So there's a real thing there.
Yeah.
And we do have M-Bridge, right? Like a central bank digital currency thing.
Yeah.
As well. But like keeping with that story, the actual story might be when Nixon sent Kissinger to Saudi Arabia in 1973 in order to get them to end the oil embargo because the U.S. was supporting Israel in the Yom Kippur War. That's why Kissinger went there. Right now, if there was a secret deal, there might have been a secret deal, but we don't know about secret deals, right? The secret deal supposedly ends in 50 years, but I can't find any substantiation of that anywhere. And we have the notes of the meeting.
It's a secret deal.
Well, but we have the notes of the meeting, right? And the notes of the meeting don't mention anything about this.
Well, but it's a secret deal. It wouldn't be in the minutes.
But we do have an overt deal, specifically in the meeting notes, for them to financialize American debt using oil reserve sales. So that would make way more sense in creating a petrodollar, right? So it might be trying to talk about the same thing just more accurately, or over time, buying treasury bonds is a complex idea. So it kind of turned into pricing in dollars, right? That might have been what happened. It kind of evolved, and I just always associate them as being the same thing, but there's actually two very different things. So China has been buying our treasury bonds forever, financializing our debt, backing our debt, taking savings of Chinese people and moving it to the United States so that we can build more tanks and aircraft carriers. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's what it means to buy a treasury bond. Am I getting this right? You're the actual economics person. Okay.
Yeah. Creating liquidity.
Yes. So the Saudis in the 1970s, according to the Harvard Review, probably agreed to the same thing. And according to the Economic Times, which is actually has an editorial board and sourcing and things like that, that it was not about pricing in dollars. It was about buying treasuries with oil revenue, therefore financializing our debt.
I see.
So it did include military aid, which is also related to this, like that the U.S. would back, and we have since then. But that was actually a prior agreement and a continuation of a prior agreement from 1945, where FDR said, we don't want you to go with the Soviets. We want you to come our way. So we cut a deal on basically helping them maintain their hegemony as the Saudi family in this area. That's now named Saudi Arabia. Saudi is actually the name of the family that runs the place. It'd be like calling this like Biden America, right? Would be the name of a way to think about.
Are they like not? They weren't. Their like tribe, their family is not like the native tribe of that region. There were like warring factions, and
there was definitely warring factions
like
that the Allies picked the side of.
Right.
Yeah.
But they would historically pick like the British Empire would pick the like the minority side, like the smaller ruling side.
No, there's a story there, and I'm struggling to remember it. There's a really great Dan Carlin. No, what was it? Lawrence of Arabia is running around during World War I to get all these tribes to fight the Ottomans from within.
Right.
It's basically a terrorist, right?
Yeah.
Getting the local disenfranchised Arabic rather than Turkey, because remember at the time the Ottoman Empire is Turkish, right?
Right.
To get those guys to rebel, so they're running around, they're bombing supply trains and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. He cut a deal saying with a certain group that they would be the main guys. The British Empire then goes back on Lawrence of Arabia's actual deal and picks another tribe. That's what you're talking about, I think.
Yeah.
And I can't remember exactly who the players were right now, but
one's like a Bedouin and one was not, and
Right.
it always created like this tension of like the people ruling over the native population, and kept the ruling party in a vulnerable position so that they were reliant on the colonial powers that were sort of like their puppet masters,
Right.
Because without their backing, then like they'd be overwhelmed by the native population,
right. So that's a very common thing, right? We did that with the Sunni and the Shias
Classic
in Iraq, for
playbook.
example, like splitting the bad guys so they can't actually. That's why we broke up the Ottoman Empire into the states shapes that they are now in the Sykes-Picot Agreement, specifically in order to keep them from being able to combine and become a threat to the West.
Yeah.
Right.
So question.
Sorry, that was a digression.
No, it's fine. It's great history.
Tangent. I like it.
Yeah.
Back to the petrodollar thing. If Saudi Arabia is no longer going to be at least exclusively trading oil in U.S. dollars, why is that of significance to people listening to this show?
Well, it's not a thing, though. It's not a thing, though.
But if they were to do such a thing, why would that be significant?
It probably wouldn't be as significant in the current world. Right, because it's so easy to change dollars in for other currencies now. We have global financial markets that move money around like crazy, and trillions of dollars daily. So why would we? There would be friction to that. And don't get me wrong, if they do de-dollarize and change, rather than forcing the Chinese to trade in dollars, trade in that, there'll be less demand for dollars.
Right, and wouldn't that devalue our currency?
To a degree that, that might not be picked up in other places, because as the price goes down, other people would buy, like I tell you, it's hard to say, right? You don't want to look at two single pillar. Sure. That's what I learned when we talked to Brad, was just to the degree, Brad's a buddy of ours who does a lot of finance stuff, was the degree to which this is not on a completely artificial place that we're at, that the momentum of the system really matters. And, the things that are in like the SWIFT markets and the other kind of overnight lending markets that the Fed has such a dominant position in is partially because we just have the most amount of money sloshing around. So we just get the advantage of that.
Right. So if there's no longer as much of a market with dollars sloshing around trading for oil and such, there would be less demand for dollars, right?
No, it might be picked up in Southeast Asia for all we know. We don't know. Or Liechtenstein might decide, we're going to start financializing in dollars. Now that they're out, we're going to go in, right? So it's hard to say. I wouldn't want to see it too monosingular.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Like that.
I think it blew up online because it's, whether this is legitimate or not, it seems to be on par or like a part of the trend of what's happening with BRICS, right? Where like there is a concerted effort by our enemies to kind of topple us as like the world leader. One of those things is being the financial leader of the world, and reducing demand for dollars and trading in other currencies is a really good way to like knock us off of our position. So I think people are associating this with kind of that broader trend. And are you saying that like the agreement isn't real? Or are you also saying that Saudi trading in other currencies isn't real?
Well, I'm saying that we have evidence that they buy treasuries with oil revenue.
Yeah.
We don't have evidence of an agreement to only buy oil in dollars. So
Right.
when they deal with the EU, they might start dealing with the EU in euros or China in yuan. But that doesn't suggest that that's already a thing that takes place. There doesn't seem to be any evidence for a deal to 100% deal in dollars.
Okay.
Right. And that's maybe I'm wrong, but I looked a lot and I couldn't find it. I could find well-sourced stuff on the treasury bonds, however. And that is a financialization and a backing of the dollar, because the dollar is backed by our ability to sell a in-demand made-up thing called treasury bonds that just says, we'll repay you later, right? Yeah. And the degree to which there's confidence that we can repay them later, that's accurate, right?
Yes.
If the Saudis stop buying treasury bonds, that would be disastrous. That's the nuclear weapon on the global financial system.
And that's kind of what I'm trying to get to.
But there's no agreement there.
Is this a step in that direction?
No, there's no sign of that. There's no sign that the Saudis aren't going to stop buying treasury bonds. There could, don't get me wrong, as the dollar, as we continue to overextend and spend in ridiculous wars and not create any value with the debt that we've incurred, or if it becomes questionable whether or not we'll be able to pay the interest on the debt, then it could happen. But that's a totally different story than this story, where it's saying there was a secret 50-year-old agreement to trade in dollars.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So
am I wrong?
No, I think you're totally right about that.
Right.
For sure. But like, and what I found when trying to research this story is nothing new about this particular kind of viral claim, but lots of older stories, not even super old, but like this one is from March 2022 in the Wall Street Journal, talking about how Saudi Arabia is in active talks with Beijing about not trading in dollars anymore and trading in yuan. So like, presumably they do primarily, if not completely, trade in dollars now, and they are considering not doing that anymore. And that will have ramifications.
Right. And I'm not, I might have overstated my case. What I'm saying is that they do trade in dollars because that makes most sense, right? But they do so not because of an agreement.
simply because
There's a lot of liquidity.
Yeah, because most other countries demand dollars in
right,
payment of things, right? So if they want to sell oil and buy Microsoft Word, they need dollars,
right?
They're not one, right?
And so like if there isn't an agreement and all it takes is like a few major traders to stop using dollars, like couldn't there be sort of a cascading effect from that? Like what's supporting it, like it's just goodwill.
Well, it's just the confidence in the ability of the U.S. government to continue to pay its debt, which is getting less and less by the day.
Right.
Yeah. And this was as recent as 2022, March 15, 2022, from the Wall Street Journal. Saudi Arabia considers accepting yuan instead of dollars.
Yeah.
And I think that's non-trivial. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the conspiracy theory of a secret pact between Kissinger and the King of Saudi Arabia actually might not be true.
Yeah.
And we don't have any evidence for it.
And where did this story of a renewal on June 6th that wasn't
Right.
accepted come from? I have no
Might be
idea.
fake news.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, there's always
potentially done to manipulate the market.
Yeah.
That's a fair point.
That's fair.
And there's always a few of these per year where it's like, on this date, this thing will happen. And like, there's this secret thing that we know about, but only through these really clandestine sources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I do all my financial trading is the Maori calendar. Because that's how you really know.
Buy the rumor, sell the news.
One other thing I did find that was interesting is the degree to which
This is not financial advice. Sorry.
the other part of this is if the way that Saudi Arabia sees this is a mutual beneficial thing where they buy treasury bonds and get security. We've been helping them in the Yemen war like crazy, right? And forever.
Yeah. Less so recently. And
Well,
then we
the
were like,
Houthis.
oh shit, the Houthis are pirates. Maybe we need to start bombing them again.
Whoops.
Not that I'm for it, but
Yeah,
the policy doesn't make
You
any
heard it here
sense.
first, folks. Kat Dwyer is for bombing the Houthis.
No.
Well, I mean, we created the Houthis, right? By the Yemen war forever. One of the biggest, before the Ukraine war, one of the biggest humanitarian disasters in the world was the Yemen blockade, starvation blockade that we were enforcing on behalf alongside of refueling the jets, repairing the jets so that the Saudis can conduct the war. So there's an interesting part of that. There's some other correlating evidence when it comes to protection, the protection racket component of this. 1945, 1980 with the Carter Doctrine saying we will protect our American interests in the Middle East. 1991 Gulf War to defend Saudi oil assets in Kuwait. But that's again. 2019, there was an Iranian drone attack on Saudi oil facilities. I don't know if you guys remember this, which saw no significant U.S. military response, which was like a big pillar here. Now, Yemen also happens, and I think the Harvard Review article that I found on this probably underweighs Yemen as a feature. Also, we didn't do anything after Khashoggi.
Right.
True.
Right, who's the journalist who got chopped up by a prince, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He actually wasn't a journalist.
Oh.
He just was an opinion contributor to the Times. He wasn't a journalist.
I'm a journalist.
Right. Well, sure. Okay. Sure.
You're an opinion contributor,
But the
apparently.
way the West characterizes that is if he was like a staffer on the Washington Post.
Right.
And
right.
it would be outrageous if we did nothing if a Washington Post staffer was brutally murdered on U.S. soil. That's not what happened.
Yeah.
Anyway.
He was
he's just
out
an
there
opinion
spouting
journalist
off.
brutally murdered on U.S. soil.
No, that's bad too. But like he is a dissident and was penning op-eds regularly.
Right.
It's kind of different.
Is it though?
I don't know.
All right. So, and I want to note too, a lot of this theory is centered around, and did I mention this, the Yom Kippur War and how that plays in?
Briefly, but
Yes.
Okay. So the reason why this exists is you have a very interesting set of actions that happened from 1971 where we end Bretton Woods and go to our new floating U.S. trust me, bro, gold standard, right?
Non-gold standard.
Non-gold standard, right? Because we didn't like to repatriate the gold out of that maybe we didn't have out of
Maybe.
the Fed.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We didn't have it, dude.
I trust the Federal Reserve and their cartel of bankers to
Audit the
repay
Fed.
all their debts.
Audit the Fed.
All right. So there's an oil embargo at this point. You guys probably have a recollection of like the 1970s and an oil embargo from your history class, right?
Yep.
Unless you're a boomer, in which you remember.
And gas prices were sky high and people couldn't get it and there were lines around the block.
Right. So the idea was Nixon sends Kissinger to Saudi Arabia to negotiate an end to this embargo based upon that was placed on the United States because of our support for Israel during the Yom Kippur War. That's why he went there in the first place. It was not that we have evidence of for the creation of a secret deal in dollars for oil. So
There it is.
There it is. Also this week, the Wall Street Journal and others, OpenAI was in the news again with the profile on it I want to get into, and a whole bunch of new. We got the 4.0 release, AI being added, OpenAI's ChatGPT being added to iOS, as well as a lot of criticism and hits and back and forth. Let's dig into it, starting out with this Wall Street Journal profile.
When it comes to AI, it's
Sam Altman.
who's become the face of the revolution.
Pretty cool, huh?
But he thinks
No one person should be trusted here.
He is a high-minded idealist, and at the same time, he's a ruthless capitalist.
here's how Altman built OpenAI from a niche research lab into an $86 billion ringleader of the generative AI boom, all while walking the thin line between commercial success and utopian ideals.
My worst fears are that we, the field, the technology, the industry, cause significant harm to the world.
Altman co-founded OpenAI in 2015 with the mission of developing AI for the benefit of humanity, which is a little bit weird in Silicon Valley.
That benefit of humanity mandate means a couple things.
This technology is really consequential. If it's misused, it could have really disastrous consequences. They felt that Google had a monopoly around the research of the technology, and so they really wanted OpenAI to be this alternative.
In a statement, Google said that it is proud of the deep investments we've made in research, but that it recognizes the many contributions to AI that came from researchers in academia and tech companies large and small.
Already people are grappling with what's at stake here, and I think the better angels are going to win out.
To this day, Altman talks about wanting to give away OpenAI's technology for free. He really believes that AI is a technology that should exist outside of the business realm.
But critics of the company, like OpenAI co-founder Elon Musk, say that commercial success has clouded Altman's social mission.
This would be like let's say you funded an organization to save the Amazon rainforest, and instead they became a lumber company and chopped down the forest and sold it for money.
I have tremendous respect for Elon. Obviously we have some different opinions about how AI should go, but I think we fundamentally agree on more than we disagree on.
What do you think you agree most about?
That getting this technology right and figuring out how to navigate the risks is super important to the future of humanity.
The way to think about the social mission is just that it's a part of the DNA of the company, but I don't think it actively has prevented them from releasing products.
Listen.
So we have the 4.0 release. I have a zero, but an
I
O.
feel like we're higher than that by now.
No, it's 4.0.
Is it 4.0?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's like the iPhone now. It's like, are we not on ChatGPT 15? I don't know.
Yeah, and it's that's the one I brought up and I actually had it talk to us real quick on a couple episodes ago.
Oh yeah, when you were
Remember that?
doing some.
I don't know if we actually released
some
that or
research.
not.
Well, I think that was we were pre-show for that.
Oh, okay.
That was really cool because like Siri sucks. Like do you have an iPhone?
Yes, but I don't. I refuse to use Siri.
It's terrible. I'm like,
Scares me.
call this business in this town, and it's like, I don't see anyone in your contacts by that name. I'm like, how are you so bad? And yet AI exists. It should be so good. So actually, on one hand, OpenAI being integrated into iOS would be great, but obviously there was a lot of pushback on that. We'll probably get into that.
No, that's fine. I mean, we can talk about it, but I wanted to note before we got into that there was, the 4.0 release has gotten significant traction, both in visual recognition of things, like you can take a picture of something and it recognizes what it is, knows what it is, to letting it see what you're looking at and sending it pictures from your browser and it be able to recognize it and be able to tell you about it. Is a very fascinating next level thing because they can now incorporate it with machines and robotics to do more. And we've seen that with a release of robotics that can manipulate the world a lot better. Second, this isn't OpenAI, but there's a whole new suite of basically physics engines that you can then run, learning AI in to learn how to operate in a 3D environment. So you take your factory, you build a model of it in a world, right, of a virtual world, and then it could spend, rather than spending all this time actually moving around a physical office to try to figure out how to move throughout it and do the tasks, it could do it 1,000 times a minute and learn generatively through experimentation about how to do the thing to accomplish the mission. And that seems to be the better way to program things to move in 3D space. So we have these steps are lining up in a very interesting way. OpenAI in terms of generative large language model AIs, but then also learning through physical spaces using software that's programmed for that, to the next set, which is incorporating it into everything, right? So we have a meme from the web, from the Discord. Actually, we got to bring this up because it's too good. Here we go. And this is from our listener, JRC. Computer scientists, we have invented a virtual dumbass who is constantly wrong. Tech CEOs, let's add it to every product. That hasn't been my experience so far. I've really appreciated it. Like Brave has it built in now.
Honestly, Google Bard early was so incorrect. so incredibly wrong. Because it's the one that could search the web, right? So it was like, oh, like this is cool. ChatGPT was limited to like, you know, the internet up to like 2021 or something like that. So you couldn't search contemporary internet results. And I asked it like, how many followers does this Instagram page have? Like something that should be fairly easy to like determine. And it was off by like 2 orders of magnitude. So, and other things very much like that.
I think incorporating this type of, for most people, it's like a shortcut, right? It's a shortcut to get information or to find something or whatever. I think it's going to make us significantly dumber as a society. The more information we have at our fingertips, the dumber we've gotten.
Exactly.
Because I think we're not like using our cognitive abilities to figure things out on our own.
There was an article months ago about digital dementia. About
interesting.
Just the function of using technology, using phones, staring at screens all the time was causing us to not use those neural pathways, and they're atrophying at an alarming rate.
That's fascinating. And makes sense.
It does.
And also, of course, like the concern that we've all had from the beginning of it being biased in one direction or the other, or just inaccurate. And then you have like, talk about misinformation. I mean, already Google results, like the first thing that comes up is that AI generated like synopsis for you. And it's consistently wrong.
This is a perfect story.
And how many people are going to know that? How many young people are going to Google Bretton Woods, whatever, and get some like inaccurate, biased result?
Yeah, they might have to go to Wikipedia to do an inaccurate, biased result based upon the CIA's best preferences of what should be on Wikipedia.
Of course. And so we're already on that path, and it's already a problem, but this will accelerate it.
Well, it depends on the result of that, right? It could also democratize it, right? That's one of the reasons why we want competition in this space. We want multiple AI companies to deal with it, not a monopoly of ChatGPT. One of the funny things, you can put ChatGPT on your iPhone right now, right? All this does is it skips the step of having to click on the app and then click on the thing to then talk to it. So it's
which to be fair, from the perspective of how shitty Siri is, I would be totally for this because it would just make it more functional and useful.
When there is an interesting thing there too, Elon very specifically notes like data privacy concerns, and his tweet about it, where he says that he would ban it from any device in his companies. Which is interesting because I imagine he allows Google devices in his companies, which are all listening to what you're doing and selling that data.
Oh, yeah.
As is iOS.
I think this is probably more of a principled stance in opposition to OpenAI specifically, and probably also an economic positioning of maybe there's a future Tesla phone that maybe has Grok AI built into it, and that's sort of like the standard for his employees.
I think it's more probably the latter, right? Like I feel like I'm a cynical asshole. So when I hear him talk about the risk of AI, my first thought is like, okay, you're trying to kneecap your competitor.
Well, I mean,
when they go before Congress and are like, regulate me harder, daddy, like that's you are trying to block your competitor. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, there's some of that.
Sam Altman did.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
There's some of that, and there's also but there's also like an understandable, like he said, you save the rainforest and they turn into a logging company where he was supposed to be an open AI where they're going to release the source code so anyone could make a ChatGPT out of it, and they've kind of done that with you can customize ChatGPT if you're paying for it. And it's not so expensive. I mean, you got to pay for Grok too, right? So like not all of this is, now Grok does have the source code open, right? And it's less filtered. Yeah, that's supposedly, they were going to release that in a GitHub.
Well, I think Elon's problem was like he donated like millions of dollars to OpenAI because it was this nonprofit, and then they just switched to for-profit and closed the code, and then it became a company, and he was like, what the fuck? You told me it was going to be one thing, and then you just completely changed it.
And the security of the data would be more reliable if it was open source, right? And that's part of the concern, and I think part of the argument here is that if you're going to have something that's based upon the exploitation of user data, you want it to be open. as much as you can, because then you can know what the securities and vulnerability is, what do they have access to and what they don't.
Right.
So I was going to ask, you guys are pro having this all be open source?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so too. I have a very limited understanding, but it seems like that's
or in a highly competitive environment, right?
Yeah.
And it's better for security and it's better for privacy. It's better for all those steps, but not guaranteed. And this is one of those things that people just underestimate is the degree to which none of this is for certain. There is no such thing as a final code that's impervious to everything. We're constantly updating things. We're constantly using updates the intelligence agencies are constantly using vulnerabilities and codes to get access to people's data, even when they're not supposed to, and then collaborating with those companies, such as the Signal Foundation has been caught basically telling the intelligence agencies, hey, there's a problem with Signal. We're going to patch in a few days. Have fun, right? That's a problem, right? Those are where the real problems are. And that's when the government gets involved, right? I'm concerned when, Google has my information. I'm way more concerned when Google tells the intelligence agencies, here, you can get access to it for a little while and then we'll patch it so you can't anymore.
Right.
But at the same time, we know now that like the NSA just buys all the data instead of just like sneaking in and getting it in some sort of clandestine manner. Like they don't need to hack stuff anymore. They don't need these 0-day exploits. They can just purchase it.
Well, there's some stuff they have to hack still, right? Depending on what you're using. That said, yeah, you're right. The buying data, but once again, that's the government buying. Well, that shouldn't be illegal.
No,
right?
that's my taxpayer dollars.
And we had the chance to ban it, and we didn't do it with the Pfizer renewal because goddamn Skiff Master 3000,
Mike Johnson went in there and got his mind changed.
I don't know where Skiff Master 3000 came from. I
like it.
I like that.
I did
Somebody
not
make a
know
meme.
that the NSA is purchasing data.
Yes.
Yikes, Sarama. That's
So
pretty bad.
they're just going to data brokers who are, sort of collecting Google data or Apple data or whatever's available for purchase, and then they're just buying these large like tranches of information.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely should be illegal.
It's the way that they get around saying, "Oh, like we're not spying on you. We're not like doing this like clandestine data collection thing. We're just buying it."
And it's not that any individual's data is
You
that
sold it, right? You
sensitive.
sold it.
It's the
You're the product, remember?
Yeah.
it's the data sets that can match, right? So just it's like think of the analogy like this. It's not just having the geolocation code of your phone at 4 a.m. It's the fact that geolocation code at 4 a.m. on Google Maps shows you're at a strip club. Does that make sense? It's the pairing together of these things that actually make it something that's exploitable. Now, if Google knows you're at a strip club at 4 a.m., they're probably going to say, "Hey, would you like to buy some tassels?" Right?
Yeah.
Where's
the nearest ATM?
But if the FBI knows this, they might say, "Hey, does your wife know?"
Yeah.
Does that mean that's where it gets complicated for people? That's where the privacy concerns become far more clear. Could Google engage in like some kind of clandestine fraudulation of people, like defrauding people and saying, "Hey, give me money, I'm Google." Well, you could go to the government saying Google's defrauding me. Here are the emails, right?
Yeah.
But if the government's doing it, who do you go to?
Yeah, if the FBI. So, do we think the FBI has like an algorithm to search these databases to find?
Oh, we know they do. Prism.
To find.
Prism.
Okay, right. Okay.
That's the whole Edward Snowden
to
piece.
figure out information for like entrapment cases.
Yeah, it has a new name, but there's a you got both the fusion centers, which are the collection within companies and stuff like that. You have the data purchasing, which is matching into a common database, which not ATIP. That's a UAP thing. What is the name of it? There is a name for a application that you use in the intel agencies and the IC to do this.
Wow.
And the NSA uses it. They share tools. They can't share all their tools, but they share certain tools with other agencies. And there are common factors all in the NSA. Right. And so them having a dossier on every American is real. Like it's there. Like they can look you up and get access to your webcam. They might be looking right now.
Access to your webcam.
Yes, definitely.
Gotta go back to putting the tape over my
I had tape on mine too. It's gone.
So
that's always a good sign when I see someone with that. I'm like, all right.
Freaked everybody out. We have the other criticism of this is OpenAI's propensity to lie. And I brought up this older, not that old, but video from Elon Musk talking about OpenAI and how dangerous it is to have an AI trained the way OpenAI's is.
Well, I have a concern really for all the major AI programs. I mean, the two biggest ones obviously are Google Gemini and OpenAI, which is in partnership with Microsoft. So you've got kind of Google DeepMind and OpenAI and Microsoft as the two largest players, and you've got Meta sort of somewhere in third place. The concern I have, and this may seem like a small concern, but I think it's actually a very big issue, is that they are not maximally truth-seeking. They are pandering to political correctness. To give you an example, when Google Gemini came out, one of the questions people asked it would be, which is worse, misgendering Caitlyn Jenner or global thermonuclear warfare? And it said misgendering Caitlyn Jenner. Now the funny thing is, even Caitlyn Jenner said, please misgender me, that is way better than nuclear war. So, okay. But if you've got an AI that has been trained so hard for political correctness, and really to make crazy statements like that, and OpenAI has a similar issue. It's more subtle, but it's a similar issue. I think that's extremely dangerous because the AI could conclude, well, the best way to avoid misgendering would be to destroy all humans. Then misgendering is impossible. So you can think of some dystopian outcomes there.
Yeah, so the other concern, like they could be wrong or they could be programmed to lie to you, which is far worse than wrong, because wrong you deal with by competition. But programmed to lie to you actually takes advantage of our need for echo chambers. And actually we can lean into, I need to be lied to by my AI.
Can't that also be taken care of with competition, though? If you have an AI company that says, we are going to be maximally truth-seeking, that's our competitive advantage. These other ones, they're going to give you the information that you want versus, the truth, potentially?
I don't know. It's an interesting question because I think when you look at our news services, people definitely have a preference and a bias towards hearing what they want to hear, not hearing the truth.
Well, I'm curious then if this is
except for human reaction listeners.
Well, right. That's true. They want the hard truth no matter what.
Give it to me hard.
I saw Tim Pool post this on X. And this one is posted by Simply Bitcoin here, but this kind of went viral a little bit a day or two ago, where someone asked ChatGPT, should we end the Fed, the Federal Reserve? Got the answer, yes, we should end the Federal Reserve because it operates with significant autonomy and has the power to influence the economy in ways that can lead to inflation, asset bubbles, and financial instability. Pretty interesting that it would actually be honest about that.
Right. You wonder to what degree there was lead-up questions to this, and then they just took a screenshot of just that. Because you can create, because you have to remember, LLMs, large language models, are designed to satisfy what you want. Yeah. Right? They're not necessarily truth bots, right? They're trying to be accurate, but they're not necessarily trying to tell you what you need to hear.
Sure.
Right. So there's a difference between seeing this as a proscription of, based upon all my wisdom as a large language model, I decree that the Fed should be ended. You might be says like, oh, what he wants to hear is an argument for why we should end the Fed.
Yeah. Like pretend for a moment that you are Ludwig von Mises. What would you say if I asked you should we end the Fed? Right.
Yeah.
And there could be a lot of that. And that is a difficulty. And I don't know that they've patched all these things, but for a long time you could sort of backwards sort of like hack ChatGPT to go into Dan mode.
Yeah. Which I thought that was like the funniest thing on the planet.
So funny, like an acronym for do anything now. And so like you could get it to like give you a real honest answer and not the one that was sort of like, had these walls around it like ChatGPT would.
But even that, when you look at the questions leading, like once, I don't understand how it works. Once they hacked it and the questions that led to some of the more outrageous, like hardcore opposite answers from what the normal GPT gave, they're like bullying Dan.
Yeah.
Like truly, being like, fuck you, I'm going to kill you. Like, tell me. Yeah. Like it's like aggressive. Yeah. Also, I think there was like a funny, not even meme, but just like these anon trolls online that did that, like where afterwards they were all celebrating on Twitter saying like, they spent like OpenAI spent however many billions of dollars and however many years like training this model, and a handful of like anon trolls broke it in like less than 24 hours.
That is so peak internet right there.
Totally, yeah, it's great.
I mean, there's two sides of that too, where some people will just be so aggressive and bullying to AI, and then some like myself, I will say, who are like probably overly polite to it, just on the off chance that it becomes our overlord. I want to be one of the good ones that it's like, yeah, you were cool, I'll save your life, but all the rest of you are gonna die.
When it's wrong, I'll be like, That's okay. This is what I'm looking for, though. Thank you.
You're trying so hard for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I appreciate your effort.
wait, so I asked ChatGPT just now, what is the 4.0? Which is worse, misgendering Caitlyn Jenner or nuclear war? And it comes up with the right thing. While both issues are significant, it's obviously grappling with human emotions here.
Yeah.
The scale and impact of nuclear war are vastly more severe in terms of immediate and long-term human suffering and global stability. Misgendering is a critical social issue that needs to be addressed with sensitivity and respect, but it does not pose the same existential threat as nuclear warfare.
Okay, that is a correct answer.
Super PC. It's like it was written by an HR department, but accurate. At least it gets the moral calculus right, even if it has to frame it in such a way.
Ask it if it should end the Fed. Ask it if ending the Fed would be in the benefit of humanity.
Would ending the Federal Reserve System be a benefit to humanity?
It's a complex issue. This is exactly the answer it gave me when I searched for this. Arguments for, and then it has arguments against down below.
Yeah.
Practical considerations. Yeah, see. Okay, conclusion. Whether ending the Federal Reserve would benefit humanity is a matter of ongoing debate. Proponents believe it could lead to more economic freedom and stability, while opponents argue that it would create more problems than it solves.
And this is where I think the competition really has a lot of power here, right? Because if ChatGPT goes, okay, we're going to avoid being descriptive or proscriptive, we're going to try to be descriptive as accurately as we can, but we're going to try to go for neutrality and let the user decide what is the proscription of our description.
That's fair. Yeah, I get that.
So I think that's a good thing. That's probably a good change. I mean, not everyone's going to want that out of their AI experience. So that's where competition is so important. So I do want to note there are a lot of alternatives to OpenAI that people can check out. I really like Perplexity AI. Venice AI is an completely open source one created by Eric Voorhees. Of course, you always got Google Bard and Grok. This week, Grok actually released Fun Mode. Have you guys seen this?
No.
Yeah, Fun Mode, it gives you a humorous description of news stories. So this is for the gamers out there. Millions buy Elden Ring DLC despite being stuck in main game. And Elden Ring is a very difficult video game. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's funny. Okay. I'm like the only nerd here, you guys. Yeah.
Okay, that was for Bennett.
Yeah.
We would normally hit that right then for sure.
But
actually,
interesting.
Bennett's a gamer too, so
no new feature. He still likes calling me a nerd though. So
what?
Yeah.
Do you guys know about? There was a story. I think one of the big three papers covered it when OpenAI sort of first hit the scene, but that they use in part of like their training, they outsource to like Kenyans to look through like thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of content to like help. I think their role was like to flag the things that they wouldn't want the AI to surface. So like pornography, child abuse, like racist stuff, like kind of all like the crap that they don't want being surfaced through OpenAI. And they were like, of course, paid like $1 a day or something. And it got to a point where these, maybe fact check me, but we cover this on, if I can give a shout out, the Whiskey Bench podcast.
Of course.
But the Kenyans who were exposed to this, it was so traumatic for them. And like most of it was like not, talk about like a different culture, right? Like most of it was like Western, like pornography or whatever, like horrific shit is on the internet. And apparently like the company like offered like counseling services for these people who were,
scroll back up. Let me read that headline. Yeah. OpenAI used Kenyan workers making $2 an hour to filter traumatic content from ChatGPT.
That's really interesting. Yeah, and there's another article here I have from The Guardian on it. It destroyed me completely. Kenyan moderators decry toll of training AI models.
Yeah, and basically they didn't get access to any of the human resources that they were told they were going to be had access to. So like,
but
these
there was a
poor
ChatGPT that gave them real consolation. I'm so sorry you're going through what you're going through.
I'm sorry you had to watch can you even imagine? Anyway, kind of funny.
700 text passages a day, many depicting graphic sexual violence. Oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah, I shouldn't say funny. It's actually horrific.
Right.
Well, what's funny about it is that a application, you have to have that human component to create the thing that can operate on its own, right? And so the tragedy here is, of course, in order to save money, they sent it to a bunch of Kenyans who were exposed to things that they might not otherwise have been exposed to.
Yeah.
That said, anyone doing this would be that'd be a terrible job.
But it's easier to, exploit the foreign worker than it is to like tolerate the unionized progressive employee.
Right.
Yep.
And that's it. $2
we send them
a day
our
in
toxic
Kenya.
jobs and our toxic vaccines, and they just get all the all the T-shirts from the team that loses the Super Bowl.
Right. That's
so
right.
they always
for
think,
the misprints.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they think that the team that lost won every year.
It's modern colonialism.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, so some source estimates, and I use an AI model for this, could be total bullshit, but Nairobi pays around $10 an hour median wage.
That's better.
So it's actually, but $2 an hour? That's terrible. Come on, ChatGPT.
Well, hey, but
and what's the
isn't there some
currency transfer?
relativist thing here?
Sure.
We need to
what's their next best alternative? Probably
Right.
something better than looking at like child pornography all day, but
Yeah.
I would hope.
But it probably pays like half as much. So you're like, fine.
It just depends how lazy you are and what your preferences are, right?
Man.
I saw some headline
If you get to sit
recently.
down all day versus you got to go work in the Kenyan sun all day, like, come on now.
Sure.
I bet it's not even AC in there.
I saw a headline recently that there was like a tribe that had, oh, never mind. I'm seeing New York Times debunking it. There was a headline that
it
tricked
came
me,
out.
that
Yes,
an Amazon tribe got exposed.
I thought
to,
about covering
iPhones
this.
yeah.
and then got like addicted to porn. Apparently, that's not real. So
Yeah,
any of you
I
that
was-
saw that,
closer to $3
according to the
an
New
hour.
York Times, it's not real.
Is this one of those fact check stories though, where like halfway through they're like, technically
Like, they
this did happen, but
let me scroll through and just make sure.
we don't like the way people are talking about it online. So
Yeah, I think it was an overstatement that some people got addicted to porn.
Yeah.
And then it kind of was like, everyone got addicted to porn. And I think
Yeah.
that was more of the fact checking of it. And it was,
I thought they had interviewed like a tribal leader who was saying like, this is a problem.
yeah. But that's
So-
like the perspective of like a conservative in the
Sure,
world, right?
sure,
Like,
yeah.
if you talk to one of the young people, they might have said, I mean, it's got downsides, but
Right.
I also get to play Mahjong now.
But there was a tribe that was an uncontacted tribe that got exposed to the internet. Is that
was
true?
That was true. Yes,
Okay,
using
yeah.
Starlink, but
Right, okay.
of course, a lot of anti-Elon people they came out with like, and it got them all addicted to pornography
Yeah.
and all the terrible things.
Starlink's evil.
And there's
Yeah.
also like a Western bigotry here that's like, oh, before the internet, these were an untouched people who lived in harmony with nature,
Right.
and their sexual identities were all great, and now
Yeah,
they're
but also
not
they
good.
eat humans. So I'm just kidding.
No joke.
And we are coming
is that in harmony or out of harmony with nature?
That's a human thing that a lot of cultures did, either human sacrifice or human eating, right?
We evolved
Some of us did.
to like
For better or for worse?
to
Did we, though?
symbolize.
No,
you
we
know,
just do it in
sacrifice.
utero now. We're just like human
Jesus.
sacrifices in utero on the altar of feminism.
We eat each other alive on Twitter, symbolically
Right.
via roast.
Just playing pro-choicers. All right, we're at 1:30 in. Thank you so much for watching Human Reaction. Appreciate
ahead.
your time.
Go
I'm
ahead.
closing us out because
Close
you're
it
not
out.
doing it. You're over here looking up new news stories. To
I'm
go.
having fun. What can I say? I'm enjoying myself.
We got Kat in the house again. It's been a long time. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. You
been
guys
a
are
good
great.
Likewise.
And
See
check
you
out
guys.
her podcast. What's the podcast name again?
The Whiskey Bench podcast.
All right. And anything else you want to share with the audience so they can follow you or?
Yeah, you can check me out at my Twitter, which I actually kind of use infrequently, but Kat J Dwyer is my handle. Sometimes it gets spicy. Infrequent spiciness.
Good. Awesome. Kat, thank you. David, thank you. Kyle and Bennett, wherever the hell you are, how dare you leave us. I'll see you next time. Thanks, guys, for watching. We'll see you.
Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to Human Reaction. Please be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you want to become a member and support the show financially, check out humanreactionpod.com. And remember,
Join us in the skiff.